So Houdini is a beast to master, but it's not actually as hard as you think to start getting used to it and to start making friends with it. And that's what I'm here to show you and what I'll help you with. Is, together we'll make some friends with Houdini. So let's get in and I'll show you straight away. So we start off in camera navigation mode, as you can see down here, which you can get to by pressing escape. But since we're already there, we don't need to do that. And you can hold left mouse button to rotate, right mouse button to zoom in and out, or scroll to zoom in and out. And if you press your middle mouse button or your scroll wheel in, you can pan. Now I'm just going to drop down a box so we have something to look at in the viewport, and you'll see that's immediately changed our modes over here, and it's given us a gimbal which we can move the box around and rotate it. It's also a scale, but to get to that we have to go into the scale tool, which is this one here. I've got it remapped to a different key, so I think yours would be R for scale, and scale it in and out. And you'll see also over here that you could do the same thing by typing in a number here, or middle mouse clicking on this value here and dragging left and right. So this is what's called the ladder, the value ladder, and you can use that all through Houdini, and you can go down here for a minute adjustment or a bigger adjustment there. So, but back over here on the viewport, let's say we wanted to get out of the the scale mode. We press enter to go back to the main gimbal, and if we want to temporarily use our navigation, which is really handy, I use this all the time. You hold space down to temporarily activate your rotate or your zoom, your pan. And you can actually do that from any tool. So say I'm in the select tool and I want to navigate, I can just hold space down and use that to navigate. Now since we're in the select mode, let's show some basic selections. Just like in Cinema 4D, we have point, edge and face selections. To get to them, you want to click on this button here. And up here you can see that we have the different selection modes. So now I can start selecting points. And I'm just going to make the points bigger so you can see them in the viewport. Over here in the guides tab, I'll increase the point marker size to something a bit ridiculous, but now you can actually see it properly. And we have different selection tools like the lasso, hold shift to select multiple, control to take away from the selection. And there's a little gotcha here where if you select something in the viewport, and say I rotate around the back, you'll see that it's actually selected all the geometry behind it. And that's because we have this tool here, which is only select only visible geometry is unticked. So if I tick that and then we do that again, then pan orbit around here, you'll see that those aren't selected. So that's another little gotcha to be aware of, that one there. There's also some other tools like this one here has caught me out a couple of times where if you have it selected, you can only select like the whole geometry. If you select some of them, it selects all of the points for you or all of the edges for you. So that one, actually, when I started using Houdini, I didn't know why that was doing that. But so there you know, that'll save you a little bit of time, hopefully. Now we can toggle between these easily with with 2, 3, and 4. One is actually a different button. So 2 will take us to our point selection. So if you want to get to your right viewport, you can click on this drop down here and go set view, right viewport, or we can go to top view. They all look sort of the same because we just have a box, but I prefer the hotkey for that, and the hotkey is holding space down to get into your navigation, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is UVs. So 1 is your main viewport there, your perspective viewport, which you can also get to by that. Alright, so the next thing to know is, I guess, about the interface. We can resize our viewport by holding and dragging there. If you hover over the middle of these panes here, you see the arrow changes to point to the right, and that's indicating that we can collapse that panel down to the right, or we can bring it back. So that's really handy if you want to make some space for yourself. You can do that with all these other ones as well. One thing to note is if you ever mess up your workspace, which you probably will, there's a one-click reset for that. Reload current desktop, that'll get you back to where you are. I wish there was a one-click button for when I messed up my room to reset it, but unfortunately there's not. My bedroom, that is. Alright, so you can also build your own desktops or your own workspaces, as I prefer to call them, and save them. We'll just stick with the build one for now. That's a fairly good standard one. Alright, so now working our way around in a clockwise direction, we'll start up here with what you probably drew your attention first with these shelf tools. You can just click any one and drag out geometry there. And one thing you'll notice, one thing I forgot to mention with the tools is if you got one of them selected and you're not sure what it does, it always gives you tooltips down the bottom, which is really handy here. So keep an eye on that. Now back on the shelf tools, we actually won't go into these too much, but there's super handy things that I'll leave you to play around with and break a bit. I'm actually just gonna collapse that for now. So next up we have our animation editor, which is what I like to call the trusty spline editor. You're probably very familiar with that, so I won't go into that. Here we have our render view, which is like the picture viewer in Cinema 4D. We can see our renders. The composite, I just brought my shelf back up. The composite views where Houdini's inbuilt compositing comes. We won't be using that, so I'm just going to close that for now. The motion FX view, we won't be using this one, but that can be handy if you want to see exactly what one of your channels is doing. I won't use that. The geometry spreadsheet is probably one of the most useful ones. I use this all the time, and actually I use it so much that what we're going to do is, and I'll explain what it does in a second, but come over here to this arrow, and if we click split pane top and bottom, it'll actually give us another version of that down the bottom, and then we can have that open all the time. And just to show you what that does, say I have my box selected, okay? It's going to show us details about the geometry. So you can see that we have 0 to 7, that's 8 if you want to count that, 8 points, and that should be correct. We've got 4 on each end there. Or if I hover over my sphere, and you can go up and down, you can reverse the way that it's sorted by clicking on it here. You can sort by X position or the index. This is actually the point index. So if we reverse that, we can see we have 265 points on our sphere. That's amazing, isn't it? Wow. 256 points. I'm just going to minimize the geometry spreadsheet for now. That is really handy, so we'll just keep that down there. Continuing on, we have our parameters pane over here, or panel, either way. We have a take manager, which you'll probably be familiar with from other 3D applications. We have a performance monitor, which I don't use, and we're not going to use right now, so I'm just going to close both of them. Continuing on, we have an asset browser from, you can download assets from the Orbalt asset store online. You can actually get some really cool free assets, which I encourage you to check out and play with, but we're not going to use them right now. You can see I've already got the material here, but I'll delete that one. But this is our material palette where we can get material presets and drag them out. So there's a principled shader. And if I want to apply that, I just go back to let's say my box objects container. Click on the render tab in the parameters panel, and now I can find that material. So sorry, I clicked this button here to bring up the search. Go into our material context, and I'll explain what I'm doing right here more in a second, but for now I'll just grab principled shader, and you can see I have a lovely principled shader already. Wow. It's actually nothing on our principled shader, like it's pretty boring, so I'm just gonna, sorry I'm jumping around a bit, but I just want to give our box a little bit of color. So what I did was I clicked up here to navigate between the different contexts, and I'm going to explain what these are about right now with our tree view. This is the last one we have to go through. And the way to think of this tree view is, well, this is actually for organizational purposes, but the way to think of it is like a folder structure. So up here we have our root folder, and inside that we have other folders, or as we call them in Houdini, they are contexts. So these are different contexts. Now, like I said, these are mostly for organizational purposes. 90% of the time you'll be in the object context. Like you can fold these down and you can see our boxes and whatever in there already. And then the other one, which I'll say you use probably most of the time, is the material context, which is, you can see our principal shader is in there. The shop context is the old material context. So if you watch some other tutorials from Houdini 15 and below, I think it is, most of them will be using shop. But I think we'll try and use matte most of the time for that. But there is an exception to that. You can actually store materials inside the OBJ context, for example, and we might see that later. But so like I said, this is for organizational purposes. I don't use it that much, but the most important thing I want you to realize right now is to do with this thing right here, Vex. Now, all these other contexts are actually built on the Houdini scripting language called Vex. It's a very fast language, and I want you to know that because it's a big reason for learning Vex as soon as you can, because you learn Vex and you're basically learning how to use it all throughout the program. Like if you learn it in the OBJ context, you can use it in the material context and build your own shaders with Vex. So it's very important that you understand, Vex and how useful it is. And we'll definitely get into some Vex in other tutorials, but not in this introduction one. So I'll just close my tree view. I won't be needing that right now. And up here, I'll navigate back to my OBJ context. Now, this is my favorite part of Houdini, and the one where you probably spend most of your time. It's the network editor. The navigation is the same as in the viewport, so middle mouse to pan, scroll in and out with your right mouse button or your scroll wheel. And now these are like our folders that I mentioned before, right? So these are little containers or boxes where you can store stuff in. If you want to drop down another one of these, you can press tab to search and start searching for geo. Grab a geometry by pressing enter, drop that down, and you can see we have another one. Now, what I'm going to do is dive inside of here by double clicking, and that'll take us, down one level in our folder structure. And there's a file node. This file node is how you load geometry or files into Houdini. We don't need that, so I'm just going to delete it. And, inside of this geo node, this geometry node that we created, we can put down, another one. Say we grab a torus, press enter, and we've got a ginormous torus right there. Amazing, right? I'm just going to delete that one. I'm going to delete everything except our box, just so we clear up the space a little bit. Now this, even though it says box object, it's actually the same node that we dropped down just then, which is the geo. So I'm just going to rename this geo just for simplicity. And you can see we've got our still our principal shader up there. Now this is all pretty boring. We've just got a simple box. What if we wanted to make our own cloner? We can do that pretty easily with something called a copy stamp. So again, tab to search and typing in copy stamp. That's the one. And instead of pressing enter like I did before, I'm actually going to press shift enter. And what that'll do is drop down the node below and connect them, as well as putting on the display flag for it. Now, the display flag is something I want to explain real quickly, because that's a bit of a gotcha when you start using Houdini. So say I drop down a sphere, you won't actually see the sphere because our display flag is set to our box. That's this blue flag here. If I click it over here on the sphere, you see we've got this weird deformed sphere. I actually don't know why it's deformed like that. That's a little bit strange. Oh, it's because we had transformations on our geometry node. So I'm just going to control middle click to reset these to their defaults. Back inside, we've got our sphere displaying now. It's beautiful. But let's say we wanted to make our cloner, okay? We can pipe our sphere into the first input of the copy, highlight that, select our copy node, and let's make a few copies. I'm going to zoom out a bit so we can see what's happening. Now, there's actually nothing happened in the viewport, but if we go to our geometry spreadsheet, you'll see there's been a bunch of copies created. We've got 8 copies of our sphere over here, and you can see there's 8 points. That's because the sphere is a primitive. If we change that to like a polygon mesh, you'll see there's a lot more points. So many points. There's even more points now. All right, so we've got 8 copies of our sphere. If we translate it, that's like our linear cloner from Cinema. Pretty easy, right? Cool thing is I can swap that out anytime and I've got boxes instead of spheres. Or I can even alternate them by pressing tab and dropping in a merge node. And what the merge node will do is it'll sort of combine them together. So now if I pipe that into my copy node, you only get that sphere. Now why is that? It's because if we go back to our sphere in our box, I'm just going to home my view by pressing space and H. That's because a sphere and our box are both on world 0, so we can't actually see them at the same time. So if I want to move the box out a little bit, you can see the bounding box has moved out a bit. But I still can't see it, and that's because we can only have, one display flag on. If I wanted to put the other one on, I can click this checkbox, this flag as it's called, and get the wireframe of it. You can also come up here into some of our display modes to activate wireframe. So click on this box up here and we've got smooth wire shaded or wireframe mode. You can toggle between them by hitting Shift W. So if I go back to smooth wire shaded, I can toggle between smooth wire shaded and just shading by hitting Shift W. That's the one I use all the time. So now we've got our sphere and our box displaying in the viewport. If we merge them, however, I'll turn off my wireframe for the box. Now they're both displaying. So the merge sort of combines them together, which is pretty cool. Now if we copy that, you'll see the sphere and the box merged together is being copied. It's amazing, right? Amazing. So let's just go back to our box and let's say we wanted to make our radial cloner from before, right? I'll pipe my box into my copy stamp, activate my copy stamp again, but this time I will rotate each copy. I'll start off by setting the translates to 0, and I'll rotate each copy, and there you go, we have our radial cloner. Now the reason this is working is because we have our box off center. If we reset the box back to 0, you'll see that the copy node is rotating the box on its central axis. So it won't give us the effect we're after. It's actually a pretty cool effect, but it's not the one we're after. You get some really cool stuff just by playing around with these, with that cloner here, but I get a bit carried away with this sometimes. Now that you know the basics of how to get around, I encourage you to click a few buttons, maybe try the shelf tools and see how they work. Just to recap, we talked about how to navigate, the basics of how to work the interface, and we also talked about how Houdini is organized a bit like a folder system. In the next episode, we'll start a mini project series together. We'll go right from start to animation and lighting and rendering, so we have something nice to show at the end of it, and I think that'll be a nice fun way to learn together. So subscribe if you want to